My name is Maddie Armstrong, 62 years old, and I finally did it. After 8 years of pinching pennies and working extra accounting jobs during retirement, I bought the lakeside cottage that Samuel and I had dreamed about our entire marriage. I was barely settled in, still surrounded by moving boxes, when my phone rang. It was my daughter-in-law, Lisa, announcing that she and 22 family members would arrive in 1 hour, expecting beds made and meals prepared for a 2-week stay. The smile that spread across my face was not the one she was expecting. Let me know where you are watching from in the comments below, and hit that subscribe button if you have ever had someone try to steamroll your boundaries. Trust me, what happened next changed our family forever. The morning sun streamed through the large windows of my new cottage, casting a golden glow across the wooden floors. I stood in the center of the living room, coffee mug in hand, still not quite believing this place was mine. After decades of dreaming, saving, and planning, I had finally done it. At 62 years old, I had purchased my very own piece of paradise on Cedar Lake, Michigan. 8 years ago, when my husband Samuel passed away from a sudden heart attack, our retirement dreams seemed to die with him. We had planned to sell our suburban home once I retired from teaching high school English and buy a small cottage by a lake where we could watch sunsets together, host our grandchildren during summers, and live out our golden years in peace. When I lost Samuel, I lost my partner of 35 years, my best friend, and for a while, my sense of purpose. The first year after his passing was a blur of grief. I went through the motions of teaching my senior English classes, but the joy had gone out of it. When retirement came 2 years after Samuel's death, I made a decision. I would honor our shared dream. I took on accounting work from home, utilizing my minor in mathematics from college. I sold possessions we had accumulated over the years, simplified my life, and saved every penny. The house where we had raised our son Michael remained my home until just last week, when I finally had enough for a down payment on this cottage, using the proceeds from selling our family home to cover the rest. The cottage itself wasn't large or fancy, but it was perfect. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, an open kitchen and living area with big windows overlooking the lake, and a small private dock. The previous owners had maintained it well, and though some of the decor was outdated, the bones of the place were solid. I could already envision the vegetable garden I would plant, the bird feeders. I would hang the rocking chairs for the porch. I took another sip of my coffee and smiled. This place was all mine, no mortgage at my age, just property taxes and utilities to manage on my teacher's pension and occasional accounting work. My phone buzzed with a text message from Michael. "How's the first morning in the new place, Mom?" I snapped a photo of the sunlight dancing on the lake and sent it to him. Michael had been supportive of my decision to sell the family home, though I knew it had been bittersweet for him. At 39, he had his own life now. A successful career as a software engineer, a wife named Lisa, and my 2 beloved grandchildren, Noah and Emma, 10 and 8. Thinking of my family brought a familiar knot to my stomach. While Michael had inherited his father's gentle, accommodating nature, Lisa was a different story altogether. My daughter-in-law was what my mother would have diplomatically called strong-willed. In the 7 years since she had married my son, Lisa had demonstrated time and again that she expected the world to revolve around her plans and her needs. It had started small. Family dinners rescheduled at the last minute because something better came up. My babysitting offers accepted, then canceled, when Lisa's mother became available instead. Holiday traditions from my side of the family discarded in favor of Lisa's family customs. I tried to be understanding. After all, Michael was happy, and I didn't want to be the stereotypical difficult mother-in-law. But as the years passed, the pattern became clearer. Lisa viewed me not as family, but as a resource to be used when convenient and ignored when not. Last Christmas had been particularly telling. I had spent weeks preparing gifts and food, only for Lisa to announce on Christmas Eve that they would be spending the day with her family instead. When I expressed disappointment, she had looked genuinely perplexed. "But we saw you last Christmas," she had said, as if we were operating on some rotation system I hadn't been informed about. Despite these tensions, I cherished my relationship with my grandchildren. Noah had Samuel's curious mind and kind heart. Emma had inherited my love of books and could already read at a level well beyond her years. I made sure never to let my complicated feelings about their mother affect our bond. The kitchen timer dinged, pulling me from my thoughts. I had been baking banana bread, filling the cottage with the comforting scent of home. As I pulled the loaf from the oven, I looked around at the half-unpacked boxes, the mismatched furniture, some brought from my old house, some left by the previous owners. There was so much to do to make this place truly mine, but I had time. For the first time in years, I had nothing but time. No deadlines, no papers to grade, no clients expecting tax preparation. Just me, this cottage, and the peaceful lake outside my window. I carried my coffee to the small dock and sat down, letting my feet dangle just above the water. A family of ducks paddled by the mother in front, 5 ducklings following in a neat row behind her. The late spring air was warm, but not hot, perfect for the gardening I planned to do later. My mind wandered to the neighbors I had yet to meet. The real estate agent had mentioned that most of the lake houses around here were occupied by retirees like myself, with a few vacation homes mixed in. I looked forward to becoming part of this community, perhaps joining the book club the agent had mentioned, or the morning water aerobics group. I had just decided to start unpacking my books when my phone rang again. The screen displayed Lisa's name, and I felt that familiar knot tighten. Taking a deep breath, I answered. "Good morning, Lisa." "Maddie," she replied briskly. Lisa had never called me mom or even mother-in-law. Always Maddie, as if we were casual acquaintances rather than family. "I'm calling about the cottage. We just passed the state line. We should be there in about an hour." I blinked in confusion. "What do you mean I didn't know you were coming to visit?" "Visit," Lisa laughed. "Maddie, we're coming to stay. All of us. My parents, my brothers and their wives, my sister and her husband and kids. 22 people total. We need you to prepare rooms for everyone and plan dinner. We'll be staying for 2 weeks." For a moment I thought she must be joking, but Lisa wasn't known for her sense of humor. "Lisa, that's not possible," I began carefully. "The cottage only has 3 bedrooms, and I just moved in yesterday. Nothing is set up for guests, let alone 22 people." "Well, you'll figure it out," she said dismissively. "This is the perfect opportunity for a family vacation, and you have all that space just for yourself. It doesn't make sense for you to have a lake house and not share it." I closed my eyes, trying to steady my racing heart. This was exactly the sort of thing Lisa did. Make plans affecting others without consultation, then express surprise when people weren't thrilled to accommodate her. "Lisa, I'm sorry, but this won't work. You need to call your family and tell them to turn around or find alternate accommodations." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Lisa spoke again, her voice had that sweet, cajoling tone she used when she wanted something. "Maddie, everyone is so excited about this trip. The kids have been looking forward to swimming in the lake. My dad wants to go fishing. We can't just cancel now. Besides, you always said you bought this place to create family memories. This is your chance." The manipulation was so transparent, it would have been almost laughable if it weren't so frustrating. Yes, I had dreamed of family gatherings at the cottage, but on my terms with proper planning, not an invasion of 22 people with 1 hour's notice. "I understand everyone's excited," I said, trying to keep my voice level, "but this isn't a good time. I literally moved in yesterday. I don't even have all the beds set up, let alone enough food to feed 22 people for 2 weeks. "We can help set things up," Lisa countered. "And we'll bring some groceries. It'll be fun like camping, but with indoor plumbing. Stop being so rigid, Maddie. It's not good for you to be alone all the time anyway." I felt a flash of anger at her dismissal of my perfectly reasonable objections. Before I could respond, I heard Michael's voice in the background. "Is that my mom? Let me talk to her." There was a rustling sound. Then Michael's voice came on the line. "Hey, Mom, Lisa told you about our surprise." "Michael," I said, relief washing over me. Surely my son would understand how unreasonable this was. "I can't host 22 people with no notice. The cottage isn't ready and I need time to settle in." There was a pause, and I could practically see him running his hand through his hair, a gesture he'd inherited from his father, a sign he was uncomfortable. "Mom, I know it's short notice, but Lisa's family is already on the road. Her brother Jordan took time off work and her parents rearranged their schedule. It would be really awkward to turn them away now." My heart sank. Once again, Michael was choosing the path of least resistance, which invariably meant giving in to Lisa's demands rather than standing up for me. I don't even have enough beds, I protested, or food, or towels. We'll figure it out, Michael said, echoing his wife's dismissive tone. Everyone can bring sleeping bags, and we'll do a big grocery run. It'll be like an adventure. An adventure for them, perhaps. For me, it was a nightmare. My peaceful first week in my dream cottage transformed into cooking and cleaning for an army of virtual strangers. I need to talk to Lisa again, I said, my voice tight. Michael sighed. Mom, please don't make this difficult. You know how Lisa gets when things don't go according to her plans. And there it was, the real issue. Everyone in our family had been tiptoeing around Lisa's reactions for years, modifying our behavior to avoid her displeasure, including me. Put her on the phone, Michael. After a moment, Lisa's voice returned. So it's all settled then. We'll be there in about an hour. Oh, and can you make sure there are enough towels for swimming? The kids are really looking forward to jumping off the dock. I opened my mouth to protest again, but the line went dead. Lisa had hung up, either assuming I had agreed or more likely ensuring I couldn't say no again. I stood on the dock phone, still in hand, a sense of violation washing over me. My sanctuary, my dream, my hard-earned reward after years of saving and planning was about to be overrun by people who clearly had no respect for my space or autonomy. For a moment I considered leaving. I could get in my car and drive to a hotel, leave them to figure it out when they arrived to an empty house. But that would mean giving up my own cottage on my very first full day of ownership. No, this cottage was mine. I had worked too hard, sacrificed too much to be driven out by Lisa's entitlement. Taking a deep breath, I walked back into the house. If 22 people were about to descend on my new home, I needed help. And while I hadn't yet met my neighbors, there was no time like the present. I rushed inside and grabbed my phone, feeling like I was in some bizarre anxiety dream. 22 people coming to stay for 2 weeks. In my barely unpacked cottage with 3 bedrooms. My hands trembled as I scrolled through my contacts, trying to decide who to call. There was no one nearby who could help me. All my friends were back in the suburb I'd just left hours away. I remembered the previous owners had left a welcome binder with emergency contacts and local service numbers. Flipping through it frantically, I found a page labeled Neighbors with several names and phone numbers. The closest was someone named Martha Johnson, just 3 houses down. With no time to overthink, I dialed the number. Hello? A warm, husky voice answered on the second ring. Hi, I'm so sorry to bother you, I stammered. My name is Maddie Armstrong. I just moved into the Wilsons' old cottage 3 doors down, and I'm having a bit of an emergency. Are you hurt? Do you need me to call an ambulance? The woman sounded concerned. No, nothing like that. It's just... I paused, suddenly realizing how ridiculous my emergency would sound. My daughter-in-law just called to tell me she's bringing 21 other people to stay at my cottage. They'll be here in an hour, and I have nothing ready. I don't even have enough beds or food, and they expect to stay for 2 weeks. There was a moment of silence, then a burst of incredulous laughter. I'm sorry, the woman said, but did you say 22 people are coming to stay for 2 weeks, with 1 hour's notice? Yes, I said, feeling slightly hysterical myself. I know it sounds absurd. It doesn't sound absurd, it is absurd, she replied firmly. My name is Martha, by the way. I'll be right over. Do you drink wine? This sounds like a situation that calls for wine. It's not even noon, I protested weakly. Honey, if there was ever a justified morning for wine, this is it. Sit tight. I'll be there in 5 minutes. True to her word, Martha arrived at my door 5 minutes later. She was a tall, slender woman around my age, with silver hair cut in a stylish bob and bright blue eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled. In one hand she held a bottle of white wine, in the other a notebook and pen. Reinforcements have arrived, she announced, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Now tell me everything. I explained the situation as Martha uncorked the wine and poured 2 generous glasses. I described Lisa's call, her expectations, Michael's lack of support, and my own conflicted feelings. So these people think they can just show up and take over your new home without even asking. Martha's indignation was oddly comforting. And your son is okay with this? Michael tends to follow the path of least resistance, I admitted. It's easier for him to pressure me into giving in than to stand up to Lisa. Martha took a thoughtful sip of wine. Maddie, the first thing you need to understand is that you are not obligated to host anyone, let alone 22 people for 2 weeks with no notice. This is your house. You get to decide who stays here and when. But they're already on the way, I said helplessly. What can I do? You have several options, Martha said, her voice calm but determined. One, you can tell them no. When they arrive, you can firmly but politely explain that this doesn't work for you and they need to find alternative accommodations. I winced at the thought of the confrontation this would cause. The disappointed children, Lisa's anger, Michael's discomfort. 2, Martha continued, you can set clear boundaries about who can stay and for how long. Maybe just your son, his wife, and their kids can stay with you, and everyone else needs to find hotels. 3, you can allow them to stay, but establish ground rules about use of space, expectations for meals, cleaning, etc. I don't even know where they would all sleep, I said, looking around at my half-unpacked living room. Martha followed my gaze. How many actual beds do you have set up right now? Just mine in the master bedroom, I admitted. The second bedroom has a bed frame but no mattress yet. The third bedroom is completely empty except for boxes. And how much food do you have in the house? I gestured to my nearly empty refrigerator. Some eggs, milk bread, and the banana bread I just baked. I was planning to go grocery shopping later today. Martha's eyes widened. So they expect you to magically produce beds and food for 22 people within an hour. Before I could respond, my phone rang again. It was Lisa. Hi, Lisa, I answered, putting the call on speaker so Martha could hear. Maddie, I forgot to mention, can you make sure the boat is ready? Dad and the boys want to go fishing as soon as we get there. I blinked in confusion. Lisa, I don't have a boat. But the listing for the cottage showed a dock, she said, her voice taking on that impatient tone she used when people failed to meet her expectations. Yes, there's a dock but no boat. I just moved in yesterday, Lisa. I haven't had time to buy a boat, nor do I have the budget for one right now. Well, that's disappointing, she sighed. Can you at least check if there's somewhere nearby that rents boats? And we'll need a big grill for tonight. Dad wants to do a barbecue. I caught Martha's eye and she mouthed boundaries silently. Taking a deep breath, I said, Lisa, we need to talk about this visit. I'm not prepared to host 22 people. The cottage isn't ready, and I don't have the resources to accommodate everyone. We've already discussed this, Maddie, Lisa said dismissively. Everyone's on the way. It's happening. We'll make it work. No, Lisa, you decided it was happening. I never agreed to this. There was a pause. Then Lisa's voice took on a saccharine sweetness that I recognized as her manipulation mode. Maddie, I know change can be hard, especially at your age, but this will be good for you. You shouldn't be all alone in that big cottage anyway. This way you get to spend time with family instead of sitting by yourself. My age. Big cottage. I was only 62, hardly decrepit, and the cottage was modest at best. I felt a flash of anger at her condescension. Lisa, this isn't about my age or being alone. This is about respect. You made plans involving my home without asking me. We're family, she countered, as if that explained everything. Family helps each other out. We need a vacation spot, you have one. It's simple. Martha, who had been listening with increasing incredulity, passed me a note. Ask her what hotel they've booked for you since they're taking over your house. I almost smiled at the thought, but before I could say anything more, Lisa continued. Look, we're about to drive through a spotty service area. Just make whatever preparations you can. We'll be there soon, and we'll figure out the rest. Again, the line went dead before I could respond. Martha stared at the phone, then at me. Does she always do that? Make pronouncements and then hang up before you can object? Pretty much, I admitted. Maddie, Martha said, setting down her wine glass. I don't mean to overstep, but you have a serious boundary problem with your daughter-in-law. I know, I sighed. I've always tried to keep the peace for Michael's sake and for the grandchildren. It seemed easier to go along with Lisa's demands than to create conflict. And how's that working out for you? Martha asked gently. I gestured around at my chaotic living room, the half-unpacked boxes, the pending invasion. Not great, apparently. It's never too late to establish healthy boundaries, Martha said. I should know. I was a family law attorney for 30 years before I retired. I've seen what happens when families don't communicate clearly about expectations and limitations. So what do I do now? They'll be here in less than an hour. Martha stood up suddenly businesslike. First, we prepare as best we can so you're not caught completely off guard. Then when they arrive, you establish clear ground rules. This is your home, Maddie. You get to decide how it's used. With newfound determination, I nodded. Okay, let's get ready. Martha and I spent the next 45 minutes in a whirlwind of activity. We made an inventory of available bedding, one queen bed in my room, some spare blankets, and a few pillows. Martha volunteered to bring over an air mattress she kept for guests. We assessed the food situation and made a quick list of essentials that could feed a crowd. I can run to the store while you wait for them to arrive, Martha offered. Just basics to get through tonight. Sandwich makings, pasta salad fixings. That's so generous of you, I said, overwhelmed by this stranger's kindness. Neighbors look out for each other around here, Martha said with a smile. Besides, I'm invested in the outcome of this saga now. It's better than the soaps I watch. While Martha headed to the store, I tried calling Michael again. This time he answered. Mom, we're about 20 minutes away. Lisa's dad is driving the minibus they rented. Minibus? I echoed weakly. Yeah, it was cheaper than taking separate cars. Listen, Mom, I know this is sudden, but it's going to be fun. Lisa's family is really excited about the lake. Michael, I said firmly, we need to talk about this before everyone arrives. This is not going to work the way Lisa has planned. What do you mean? He sounded genuinely confused. I mean, I cannot host 22 people for 2 weeks. The cottage has one bed currently set up. I have no boat, minimal food, and I just moved in. This is completely unreasonable. There was a long pause. I know it's not ideal, he finally said, but Lisa's family has already taken time off work. They're expecting a lake vacation. That's not my responsibility, Michael. Lisa made these plans without consulting me. She can't just decide to use my home like a hotel. Mom, please. Michael's voice took on the pleading tone he'd used as a teenager when asking for something he knew was a stretch. Just for a few days, they don't all have to stay the full 2 weeks. I felt my resolve weakening. This was the pattern we'd established over years. Lisa would make unreasonable demands, Michael would plead, and I would give in to keep the peace. No, not this time. This was my cottage, my sanctuary, the fulfillment of the dream Samuel and I had shared for decades. I would not let it be commandeered on day one. Michael, I love you, and I want to spend time with you and the kids. But this is my home, not a vacation resort. When you arrive, we are going to have a serious conversation about boundaries and respect. Before he could respond, I heard commotion in the background. Excited voices, doors slamming. We're here, Mom, Michael said, sounding both relieved and apprehensive. I see your cottage up ahead. Through the front window, I watched as an actual minibus pulled into my driveway, followed by 2 additional cars. The vehicles disgorged what seemed like an endless stream of people, adults, children, and even 2 dogs. They stretched and chatted excitedly, pointing at the lake and my cottage, completely oblivious to the fact that their arrival was unwelcome and unexpected. Lisa was the first to approach the front door, a bright smile on her face that didn't quite reach her eyes. Maddie, she exclaimed, as if we were old friends reunited after years apart. We made it. Isn't this exciting? Behind her, the rest of her family began unloading suitcases, coolers, and what appeared to be enough gear for a month-long camping expedition, not a 2-week stay in a cottage. As I stood in the doorway, watching this invasion unfold, I felt something shift inside me. After years of accommodating Lisa's demands and Michael's conflict avoidance, something snapped. This was my home, my dream, my sanctuary, and I was done being a doormat. With newfound resolve, I stepped onto the porch to confront the horde descending upon my cottage. The scene before me was pure chaos. Lisa's parents were directing traffic like airport ground crew, pointing to where bags should go. Her 2 brothers and their wives were already heading toward the dock, children in tow. Lisa's sister was unleashing 2 golden retrievers who bounded toward my flower beds. All while Lisa stood on my porch beaming as if she had orchestrated the perfect surprise. Come on in, everyone, she called over her shoulder. Maddie has plenty of room. Before I could protest, people began streaming past me into my cottage. The children ran straight through the living room and out the back door toward the lake, while the adults began claiming spaces. "Oh, this bedroom is perfect for us," I heard Lisa's mother say from my master bedroom. "Thomas, bring our bags in here." "Kids, you can set up camp in the living room," one of Lisa's brothers announced, moving my reading chair without asking. Lisa herself headed straight for the kitchen opening cupboards and the refrigerator. "Maddie," she called, frowning, "where's all the food, and why aren't the beds made up yet?" I stood in the center of my own living room, feeling invisible, as strangers rearranged my furniture, opened my closets, and claimed my space as their own. A small boy I didn't recognize ran past me, accidentally knocking over a box containing photo frames. One crashed to the floor, the glass shattering. It was a picture of Samuel and me on our 30th anniversary. "Oops, sorry, lady," the boy called, not stopping as he raced after the other children. Martha chose that moment to return her arms full of grocery bags. She stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene with wide eyes. "Good Lord," she muttered under her breath. "It's a full-scale invasion." Lisa spotted her and frowned. "Who are you?" "I'm Martha Johnson, Maddie's neighbor." Martha replied, her voice cool but polite. "And you must be Lisa." Lisa nodded distractedly. "Can you put those groceries in the kitchen? We'll need to make a bigger run later, though. This won't feed everyone for 2 weeks." Martha raised an eyebrow but didn't move. Instead, she looked at me, her expression clearly asking, "Are you going to say something?" I took a deep breath, trying to calm the anger and frustration building inside me. This was not how this was supposed to go. This cottage was my dream, my reward for years of hard work and sacrifice. And within hours of moving in, it had been taken over by people who clearly had no respect for my space or autonomy. At that moment, Michael finally entered carrying sleeping bags and looking somewhat sheepish when he saw my face. "Hey, Mom," he said, setting down his load. "So this is happening, I guess." "Michael," I said quietly, "this is not okay." Before he could respond, Lisa's father emerged from the hallway. "The plumbing in the bathroom seems a bit slow. You might want to get that checked, Maddie. And where's the boat? The boys are ready to go fishing." "There is no boat," I repeated, my voice rising slightly, "as I told Lisa on the phone." Lisa waved a dismissive hand. "We'll figure something out. Maybe one of the neighbors can lend us theirs." She glanced at Martha hopefully. "My canoe holds 2 people," Martha said flatly, "and it stays locked in my boathouse." A crash from the kitchen drew everyone's attention. One of Lisa's nephews had pulled out my blender and dropped it pieces of plastic and glass, now scattered across the floor I had just mopped that morning. "Jimmy," Lisa's sister called half-heartedly, "be careful with Aunt Maddie's things." "I'm not his aunt," I said, my voice barely audible above the growing din of people settling into my home. Martha touched my arm gently. "Maddie," she whispered, "you need to speak up now, or this will continue for 2 full weeks." She was right. If I didn't establish boundaries immediately, this group would steamroll over every aspect of my new life here. I thought of Samuel, of how hard we had both worked for this dream, of the years I spent saving after his death to make it happen. I thought of the peace and purpose I had hoped to find here. Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the center of the living room and did something I hadn't done since my teaching days. I put 2 fingers in my mouth and whistled loud and sharp. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to me in surprise. "Everyone, may I have your attention, please?" I said, my teacher voice firmly in place. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding that needs to be addressed immediately." Lisa laughed nervously. "Maddie, everything's fine. We're just getting settled in." "No, Lisa, everything is not fine," I replied, keeping my voice steady but firm. "I just moved into this cottage yesterday. I was not consulted about this visit. I did not invite 22 people to stay for 2 weeks. This is my home, not a vacation rental." The room was completely silent now. Lisa's smile had frozen on her face. Michael looked uncomfortable, but surprisingly not angry. Lisa's parents exchanged glances. "Now," I continued, "I understand that you've all traveled here expecting a lake vacation, but this simply isn't possible as planned. This cottage has 3 bedrooms, one of which currently has a bed. I do not have the capacity to host 22 people." "We brought sleeping bags," one of Lisa's brothers offered. "That's not the point," I said. The point is that Lisa made plans involving my home without asking me. That's not acceptable." Lisa's face flushed. "We're family," she protested. "Family helps each other." "Yes, family helps each other," I agreed. "When asked, not when demanded, not when someone makes assumptions about using someone else's space and resources without permission." "Mom," Michael stepped forward, his expression troubled. "Maybe we can work something out. Not everyone has to stay here. Some people could find hotels nearby." I appreciated his attempt at compromise, even if it came too late. "That would be a start," I acknowledged. "But there's a more fundamental issue here that needs to be addressed." I turned to face Lisa directly. "Lisa, this is my home. I worked for years to make this dream a reality. I deserve to have a say in how it's used and who stays here. Your assumption that you could bring 22 people here without asking is disrespectful not just to me, but to your father and brothers who took time off work based on plans you made without consulting the person whose home you intended to use." Lisa's mother stepped forward, her expression concerned. "Lisa, did you really not ask Maddie before arranging all this?" Lisa shifted uncomfortably. "I told her as soon as we were on the way," she muttered. "1 hour's notice is not asking permission," her mother said sharply. "Thomas and I would never dream of showing up at someone's house with 20 relatives without an explicit invitation." "I thought she'd be happy to have company," Lisa protested. "She's all alone in this big house." "This is my home," I repeated. "Whether I'm alone or not is my choice, and this house isn't that big. It certainly can't comfortably accommodate 22 people." Martha, who had been silently watching, spoke up. "If I may make a suggestion, I know several neighbors around the lake who rent out rooms or entire cottages for the summer. I'd be happy to make some calls, see if we can find alternate accommodations for most of the group." Lisa's father nodded gratefully. "That would be very kind. We should never have assumed we could all stay here." He shot a disapproving look at his daughter. "In the meantime," I said, feeling more confident now, "I'm happy to have Michael, Lisa, Noah, and Emma stay with me. The children can use sleeping bags in the second bedroom, and you two can use the pull-out couch until we get the third bedroom set up." Michael looked relieved at this compromise. "Thanks, Mom. That's very generous of you." Lisa, however, still seemed upset, her arms crossed defensively across her chest. "I can't believe you're making such a big deal out of this. I was just trying to plan a nice family vacation, at someone else's expense and without their consent," Martha muttered, not quite under her breath. I shot Martha a warning look, then turned back to Lisa. "I understand you wanted a family vacation, and I'm not against the idea in principle, but this needed to be a conversation, not a unilateral decision." For a moment, I thought Lisa might argue further. Instead, to my surprise, her shoulders slumped slightly. "Fine," she said shortly. "I'll tell everyone to look for other accommodations." As Lisa moved away to break the news to her family, her mother approached me. "I'm Evelyn," she said, extending her hand, "and I want to apologize for this situation. I had no idea Lisa hadn't properly arranged this with you. She told us you were thrilled to host everyone." "It's not your fault," I assured her, "but I do appreciate the apology." Over the next hour, a remarkable transformation occurred. Martha, true to her word, made several calls and managed to find accommodations for most of Lisa's family. A neighbor 2 houses down had a vacant 4-bedroom cottage they were willing to rent for the week. Another had a finished basement apartment. Martha herself offered her spare bedroom to Lisa's parents. Lisa's family, far from being angry with me, seemed largely understanding once they realized what had happened. Several apologized for the intrusion, looking genuinely embarrassed about the situation. The children were initially disappointed about not all staying together, but brightened when I suggested we could still have daily gatherings at the lake. By late afternoon, most of the group had relocated to their new accommodations, leaving just Michael, Lisa, and my grandchildren at the cottage. Lisa remained cool and distant, clearly unhappy with the turn of events, but no longer openly challenging my decision. As the commotion settled, I found myself sitting on the dock with Noah and Emma, watching the sunset over the lake. They had already changed into swimsuits and were dangling their feet in the water, excited to be at a lake house, regardless of the day's drama. "Grandma, is this really your house now?" Emma asked, her 8-year-old face serious. "Yes, sweetheart. This is my new home." "It's awesome," Noah declared, splashing his feet energetically. "Can we come visit a lot?" Of course you can, I said, putting an arm around each of them. I bought this place partly so I could have special time with you both, but next time we'll plan the visit in advance, okay? They nodded, untroubled by the day's tensions, simply happy to be at the lake with their grandmother. As I sat there with my grandchildren watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, I felt a mix of emotions: pride in finally standing up for myself, sadness that it had been necessary, hope that perhaps this confrontation could lead to healthier relationships moving forward. This was not how I had envisioned my first full day in my dream cottage. But as Noah pointed out a family of ducks swimming near the dock and Emma leaned her head against my shoulder, I realized that despite the chaos, there was still room for new beginnings and second chances. Behind us, I heard Martha's voice calling from the porch. "Dinner's ready, lake people. I made enough pasta to feed an army, or at least 4 humans and 1 very tired grandmother." I smiled. It wasn't the peaceful day I had planned, but somehow I'd found both my voice and a new friend. Not a bad outcome for what had started as a near disaster. The morning after what Martha had dubbed the Great Cottage Invasion, I woke early, momentarily disoriented by the sound of other people in my home. Then I remembered. Michael and Lisa sleeping on the pull-out couch, Noah and Emma in sleeping bags in the second bedroom. Not the 22 people Lisa had originally planned to install in my cottage, but still an adjustment from the solitude I had anticipated. I slipped quietly out of bed and made my way to the kitchen, careful not to wake anyone. Through the window, I could see the lake bathed in the soft pink light of dawn mist rising from the surface like something from a painting. Despite yesterday's chaos, the sight renewed my sense of gratitude for this place. As I brewed coffee, I heard footsteps behind me. Turning, I saw Lisa already dressed and looking uncomfortable. "Good morning," I said cautiously. "Morning," she replied, not quite meeting my eyes. "The kids will be up soon. They're excited about swimming." I nodded, pouring 2 cups of coffee and offering one to her. After a moment's hesitation, she accepted it. "Maddie, about yesterday," she began, her voice uncharacteristically tentative. "I may have overstepped." Coming from Lisa, this was practically a full apology. I hid my surprise behind my coffee cup. "Yes, you did," I confirmed, seeing no reason to sugarcoat it, "but I appreciate you acknowledging that." Lisa sipped her coffee, looking out at the lake. "I just thought it would be a nice surprise for everyone, a big family vacation at a lake house. My parents never had money for trips like this when I was growing up." This glimpse into Lisa's background gave me pause. In 7 years of knowing her, she had rarely spoken about her childhood. "I understand wanting to create special experiences for your family," I said carefully. "But you need to understand that this is my home, not a vacation property. I worked very hard for many years to make this dream happen." "I know," Lisa said, surprising me again. "Michael told me how you took extra accounting jobs after retirement, how you saved every penny. I guess I didn't really think about what this place means to you." We stood in silence for a moment, the only sound the gentle lapping of waves against the dock outside. "My parents are staying with your neighbor, Martha," Lisa continued. "She seems direct." I couldn't help but smile. "She certainly is, but she was incredibly helpful yesterday." "She doesn't seem to like me very much," Lisa observed. "She doesn't know you," I countered. "She only saw you in a moment that wasn't your finest." Lisa nodded slowly. "I suppose that's fair." She hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, my parents read me the riot act last night. Dad said I was raised better than to invite myself to someone's home, let alone 21 other people." I could imagine Evelyn and Thomas delivering this rebuke. I had only just met them, but they seemed like reasonable people who were genuinely mortified by their daughter's presumption. "What about the rest of your family? Did they find places to stay?" Lisa nodded. "Yes, between the rentals Martha found and some hotel rooms in town, everyone's settled. They're all still planning to spend the days here by the lake, if that's okay with you." The fact that she was asking permission, rather than assuming, was progress. "That's fine," I said. "The lake is big enough for everyone, and I'd enjoy getting to know your family better, just not all sleeping under my roof at once." Lisa almost smiled at that. "That's fair. And I should have asked first. I'm sorry, Maddie." The apology, though clearly difficult for her to offer, seemed genuine. Before I could respond, the patter of small feet announced the arrival of Noah and Emma, both already in swimsuits, despite the early hour. "Grandma, can we go swimming now, please?" Noah bounced with excitement. "After breakfast," I said, ruffling his hair. "Bodies need fuel before big adventures." "I'll make pancakes," Lisa offered unexpectedly. "It's the least I can do after yesterday's chaos." As Lisa busied herself with pancake preparations and the children chattered excitedly about their plans for the day, Michael emerged from the living room, looking rumpled from a night on the pull-out couch. "Morning, Mom," he said, giving me a quick hug. "Everything okay?" "Getting there," I replied quietly, nodding toward Lisa, who was showing Emma how to measure flour. Michael looked relieved. "I'm sorry about yesterday," he said in a low voice. "I should have called you as soon as Lisa mentioned her plan. I knew it was presumptuous, but You took the path of least resistance," I finished for him. "It's an old pattern for us, Michael. I give in to keep the peace, and you avoid potential conflict with Lisa." He had the grace to look ashamed. "It's not fair to you. I know that. And yesterday when you finally stood up for yourself, I was actually proud of you, Mom. You've always been so accommodating sometimes to your own detriment." His insight surprised me. Perhaps Michael was more aware of the dynamics than I had given him credit for. "Your father always said I needed to be more assertive," I told him with a small smile. He'd be amused to see it took me until 62 to finally find my backbone. "Dad would be proud of you," Michael said, his eyes soft with memories of Samuel. "He always was, but especially about this place. He knew how much you both wanted it." Our conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Martha stood on the porch, accompanied by Evelyn and Thomas, Lisa's parents. "Good morning, Cottage people," Martha called cheerfully. "We come bearing gifts of bagels and moral support." I welcomed them in introducing Michael to Martha and exchanging pleasantries with Evelyn and Thomas. The kitchen quickly filled with conversation and laughter as everyone pitched in with breakfast preparations. After we ate, the children raced down to the dock, supervised by Michael. Lisa somewhat hesitantly offered to help clean up, working alongside her mother and me in a kitchen that suddenly seemed much smaller with 5 adults in it. "We've been talking," Thomas said as he dried a plate I had washed, "and we want to make this right. Our family still wants to enjoy the lake this week, but we don't want to impose on you, Maddie." "I was thinking," Evelyn added, "that instead of everyone converging on your cottage all day, we could take turns hosting at the different places we're staying, meals, gathering spots, that sort of thing." "That's a wonderful idea," I said, genuinely appreciative of their consideration. "And of course you're all welcome to swim and enjoy the lake. There's a public beach access just down the shore as well." "We'd also like to contribute to groceries and expenses," Thomas continued, "since this wasn't a planned visit for you." I started to protest, but Martha cut in smoothly. "That's very thoughtful and absolutely appropriate. Maddie's on a fixed income, and 20-plus people use a lot of resources, even if they're not all staying here." I shot Martha a look, but she just smiled innocently. She wasn't wrong, but I wasn't accustomed to such direct conversation about financial matters. "Of course we insist," Evelyn said warmly. "It's the least we can do." As the morning progressed, Lisa's brothers and sisters and their families began to arrive this time with a very different energy than yesterday. Instead of barging in and claiming space, they approached respectfully, introducing themselves properly and asking permission before using anything. The children all gravitated to the lake, where Michael had found some old inner tubes in the boathouse. Adults set up chairs on the shore, the atmosphere gradually shifting from tense to festive. Martha introduced me to other neighbors who stopped by, curious about the sudden influx of people. By midday, what had started as an invasion had transformed into something like a community gathering. Lisa, I noticed, was making an effort. She consulted me before suggesting activities helped corral the children when they became too rowdy, and intervened when her youngest nephew started picking flowers from my newly planted garden. "Those are Grandma Maddie's special flowers," she told him firmly. "We need to ask before we pick them." Grandma Maddie. It was the first time Lisa had ever referred to me that way, and though it was a small thing, it felt significant. As the afternoon sun began to lower in the sky, Thomas fired up a portable grill he had brought, and the extended family gathered for an impromptu barbecue. Someone produced a guitar, and Lisa's brother Jordan, it turned out, had a beautiful singing voice. Sitting in a lawn chair, watching my grandchildren play with their cousins in the shallow water, listening to the blend of conversation and music, I felt a strange sense of peace. This was not the solitary first week in my cottage that I had envisioned, but there was joy in this chaos too, a different kind of joy than I had expected, but real nonetheless. Martha settled into the chair beside mine, offering a glass of iced tea. "So not exactly the peaceful cottage life you had in mind for your first full day." "Not exactly," I agreed with a smile, "but not entirely terrible either." "You did good standing up for yourself," Martha said, her voice approving. "It's not easy to establish boundaries, especially with family." "I've spent most of my life avoiding conflict," I admitted. "Samuel was always the one who could say no without feeling guilty." Martha nodded thoughtfully. "My Harold was the same way, direct but never unkind. It's been 5 years since I lost him, and I'm still learning to be my own advocate." "You seem to be doing just fine in that department," I observed with a smile. Martha laughed. "Years of practicing law will do that for you, but in personal relationships, that's always harder." As the evening progressed, I found myself in conversation with various members of Lisa's family, learning about their lives and sharing stories of my own. They were for the most part warm and engaging people who seemed genuinely apologetic about the previous day's misunderstanding. Lisa's sister Jenna, a kindergarten teacher, was particularly easy to talk to. "Lisa has always been our family bulldozer," she told me with an affectionate eye roll. "She decides what needs to happen and expects the world to fall in line. It usually works out because she's also incredibly competent, but sometimes she forgets that other people have their own plans and preferences." "That's a very charitable way to describe it," I said. Jenna laughed. "Well, she's my sister. I've had a lifetime to develop charitable interpretations of her behavior. But I'm glad you stood your ground yesterday. She needs that sometimes." As darkness fell, someone lit tiki torches along the shore, and the gathering took on a magical quality. Children toasted marshmallows over a small fire pit, their faces glowing in the flickering light. Adults shared stories and laughter, the earlier tension completely dissipated. Looking around at this impromptu community, my family, Lisa's family, new neighbors, I felt a sense of possibility that had been missing in my life for too long. Perhaps this cottage would indeed be the place for new beginnings, just not in the way I had initially imagined. Later, as people began to disperse to their various accommodations for the night, Lisa approached me where I stood on the dock, watching the moon's reflection on the water. "Thank you," she said simply, "for today, for finding a compromise, for giving my family a chance after we started so badly." I nodded, acknowledging her gratitude. "Family is important, Lisa. I've always believed that. I just needed you to understand that being family doesn't mean boundaries don't matter. In fact, respecting each other's boundaries is what makes family relationships healthy." Lisa was quiet for a moment, then said, "My mother never had boundaries. She let everyone walk all over her, my dad's family neighbors, even us kids. I always swore I'd never be like that. I'd be strong, decisive, but I think maybe I went too far in the other direction." This glimpse into what had shaped Lisa explained so much about her behavior. "There's a difference between being strong and being inconsiderate of others' needs and feelings," I said gently. "I'm learning that," Lisa admitted. The hard way, apparently. As we stood together in the moonlight, I felt a shift in our relationship, not a complete transformation, but the beginning of something new. A tentative respect, perhaps, a willingness to see each other more clearly. Back inside the cottage, Michael had helped the children prepare for bed. Noah and Emma were already asleep in their sleeping bags, tired out from a day of swimming and play. Michael was making up the pull-out couch again, but paused when Lisa and I entered. "Everything okay?" he asked, looking between us. "Getting there," Lisa said, echoing my words from that morning. "Your mom's been more understanding than I deserve." Michael's relief was palpable. "I'm glad. This place means a lot to Mom, Lisa. It was her and Dad's dream for so long." "I know that now," Lisa said quietly. "I should have respected that from the beginning." As I prepared for bed that night, I found myself reflecting on the unexpected turn my new life at the cottage had taken. In just 2 days, I had stood up for myself, made new friends, and begun to reshape a difficult family relationship. It wasn't the peaceful transition I had envisioned, but perhaps it was exactly what I needed. Samuel would have been proud, I thought, as I drifted toward sleep. Not just of the cottage itself, but of how I had finally found my voice after all these years. Sometimes the most valuable gifts come in the most unexpected packages. The remainder of the week unfolded in a way I never could have predicted. After the initial chaos and subsequent resolution, a new pattern emerged, one that respected my boundaries while still allowing for the family gathering Lisa had envisioned. Each morning I would wake early and enjoy an hour of solitude on the dock with my coffee watching the sunrise over the lake. This became my sacred time, and everyone, even the early rising children, came to respect it. Sometimes Martha would join me, our friendship deepening through these quiet moments of shared contemplation. After breakfast, the extended family would gather, but now they rotated between the various accommodations they had secured around the lake. One day, we would all meet at the cottage. Lisa's brothers had rented the next at the public beach, another at my place. This spread out the impact and gave me breathing room between hosting duties. Meals became cooperative affairs rather than my sole responsibility. Evelyn turned out to be an excellent organizer, creating a schedule where different family units took turns preparing meals for everyone. The food was abundant and diverse, reflecting the various cooking traditions and skills within the extended family. I discovered unexpected connections with several of Lisa's relatives. Her father Thomas shared my love of birdwatching and could identify every species that visited the lake. Her brother Jordan and I bonded over a mutual appreciation for classic literature. Her sister Jenna and I exchanged teaching stories, finding common ground despite the age gap between her kindergartners and my former high school students. Lisa herself seemed to be making a genuine effort to change her approach. She consulted me before making plans that involved my cottage asked permission rather than assuming, and on several occasions I overheard her redirecting her family members when they were about to overstep. "Aunt Susan, please don't rearrange Maddie's bookshelves," she said one afternoon. "This is her home, not a rental." It wasn't perfect. Old habits die hard, and Lisa occasionally slipped into her commanding mode, particularly when she was tired or stressed. But the effort was evident and appreciated. Michael, too, was changing. Instead of automatically siding with Lisa to avoid conflict, he began mediating more fairly, considering my needs as well as his wife's preferences. One evening, I overheard him gently but firmly telling Lisa that they needed to limit their visit to 1 week rather than the originally planned 2. "Mom needs time to settle into her new place," he explained, "and we should have discussed this with her from the beginning." The children, Noah and Emma, were in their element. They spent days swimming, building sand castles, learning to fish from Thomas, and exploring the small wooded area behind the cottage. In the evenings, they would curl up beside me on the porch swing, asking for stories about their grandfather and the adventures we had planned for this very cottage. "Would Grandpa Samuel have liked it here?" Emma asked one evening, her small hand tucked in mine. "He would have loved it," I told her honestly. This was our dream for many years. To have a place by the water where we could watch sunsets and host family gatherings. "Like this one?" Noah asked. I smiled, thinking of the initial chaos and subsequent harmony. "Yes, very much like this one, though perhaps with a bit more advanced planning." By midweek, what had started as a crisis had transformed into something unexpectedly wonderful. The cottage was fulfilling its purpose as a gathering place, just not in the overwhelming way Lisa had originally planned. My boundaries were respected, my need for occasional solitude understood, and yet I was far from isolated. On Thursday evening, Evelyn and Thomas invited everyone to a special dinner at the small event space attached to the local marina. They had arranged for a local catering company to provide a feast and insisted on hosting as a thank you for everyone's flexibility after the rocky start. "We want to especially thank Maddie," Evelyn said, raising her glass in a toast, "for her grace and forgiveness when we descended on her new home without warning, and for teaching our daughter an important lesson about respect and boundaries." There was gentle laughter at this. Lisa included, her face showing embarrassment, but also good humor. "And to Martha," Thomas added, "for stepping in to help a new neighbor and for finding accommodations for our oversized group on short notice." Martha, seated beside me, whispered, "I'm billing them for my real estate services." But her eyes twinkled with mischief. After dinner, as everyone mingled on the marina's deck overlooking the lake, Lisa approached me, 2 glasses of wine in hand. She offered one to me and leaned against the railing. "If I could do it over," she said without preamble, "I'd have called you a month ago and asked properly. Suggested maybe we rent a few cottages nearby for a family lake week. Asked what would work for you." "That would have been a much better approach," I agreed, accepting the wine. "I've always been like this." Lisa continued, her gaze on the sunset painting the sky in vivid pinks and oranges. "Taking charge, making plans, assuming everyone will fall in line. It's worked for me in my career. I'm good at getting things done, but I'm realizing it doesn't always work so well in relationships." "Different contexts require different approaches," I said. "The directness that makes you successful at work might feel like steamrolling in family relationships." Lisa nodded thoughtfully. "My mom pointed out something similar. She said I'm so focused on the outcome, a perfect family vacation in this case, that I sometimes don't consider the process or other people's feelings." "That's very insightful of her." "She also said," Lisa continued with a small smile, "that you handled the situation with more grace than she would have. She would have locked the doors and called the sheriff." I laughed at that. I considered it briefly. We stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the sun sink lower over the lake. "Michael told me how long you and Samuel saved for this place," Lisa said eventually. "How it was your shared dream for retirement. I didn't really understand what this cottage meant to you." "It represents a lot of things," I admitted. "A promise kept to Samuel, financial security in my later years, independence, a new chapter of my life." "And then I tried to hijack it on day 1, Lisa said ruefully. "You did," I agreed. "But in a strange way, maybe it was necessary. We've had issues brewing for years. My tendency to give in to keep the peace, your tendency to take charge without consulting others, Michael's conflict avoidance. This forced everything into the open where we could finally address it." Lisa considered this. "So my spectacular boundary violation was actually therapeutic." "Let's not go that far," I said dryly. "But good things have come from it unexpectedly. I've gotten to know your family-made friends like Martha and found my voice in a way I haven't in years. And I've learned that not everything needs to be controlled by me," Lisa added, "that asking for input doesn't make me weak." From across the deck, Michael watched us with barely disguised astonishment, clearly surprised to see his wife and mother in what appeared to be a friendly conversation. He approached cautiously, as if afraid to disrupt a rare moment of harmony. "Everything okay over here?" he asked. "We're negotiating terms for Christmas," Lisa told him with mock seriousness. "I think we've agreed that everyone will wear matching pajamas and sing carols in perfect harmony." Michael's momentary panic was comical. "She's joking," I assured him. "We're just talking." "Miracles do happen," he said, visibly relieved. As the evening wound down and families began to gather their children for bedtime, Martha sidled up beside me. "Well, well," she said quietly, "quite a transformation from the invasion day." "It's been surprising," I admitted. "Life usually is," Martha replied, "especially when we're brave enough to speak our truth. You know, Maddie, you've gained a lot of admirers this week. My phone has been buzzing with neighbors wanting to meet the woman who stood up to 22 invaders and turned chaos into community." I laughed at her dramatic description. "Hardly that heroic." "Don't underestimate yourself," Martha said seriously. "What you did took courage. Many people would have given in, suffered in silence, and resented everyone for weeks." Looking around at the gathered families, Michael and Lisa with the children, Thomas teaching Jordan's son how to tie nautical knots, Evelyn and Jenna deep in conversation, I felt a sense of gratitude that surprised me. This was not the peaceful first week in my cottage that I had envisioned, but it had brought unexpected gifts. "I think Samuel would be pleased," I said softly. "Not just about the cottage, but about all of this. He always said I needed to stand up for myself more." "Smart man, your Samuel." Martha nodded approvingly. "I wish I could have met him." "He would have liked you," I told her. "He appreciated straightforward people who said what they meant." As the gathering dispersed and we returned to the cottage, the reduced group, just Michael, Lisa, Noah, Emma, and myself, felt manageable, even welcome. The children, tired from a long day of activities, fell asleep almost immediately. Michael and Lisa retired to the pull-out couch, leaving me alone on the porch with my thoughts. The week had been a whirlwind of emotions and adjustments, from the shock and violation of the initial invasion to the confrontation to the unexpected harmony that followed. Through it all, I had discovered a strength I didn't know I possessed and forged connections I hadn't anticipated. As I rocked gently in the porch swing Samuel had always wanted for our retirement home, I felt his presence strongly. Not in a mystical sense, but in the culmination of our shared dream and in my newfound ability to stand my ground. "You were right, my love," I whispered to the night air. "It's never too late to find your voice." The final days of what the children had dubbed our Big Lake adventure passed in a blur of sunshine, swimming, and surprisingly comfortable family togetherness. What had started as an invasion had evolved into something that, while not exactly what I had planned for my first week in the cottage, held its own unexpected joys. On the morning that Michael, Lisa, and the children were scheduled to leave, I woke even earlier than usual, slipping out to the dock as the first hint of dawn colored the eastern sky. The lake was perfectly still, reflecting the fading stars like a mirror. In this moment of solitude, I took stock of the whirlwind week and the lessons it had brought. The sound of soft footsteps on the dock announced I wasn't alone. Turning, I saw Michael approaching with 2 steaming mugs. "Thought you might like some company," he said, handing me a mug of coffee prepared exactly as I liked it. "And caffeine." "Thank you," I said, making room for him on the small bench at the end of the dock. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," he admitted. "Been thinking about this week, about how it started and how it's ending." We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the sky lighten and the first birds begin their morning songs. "I owe you an apology, Mom," Michael said eventually. "I should have stood up for you from the beginning. When Lisa first mentioned her plan to bring everyone here, I knew it wasn't right, but I went along with it anyway." "Why?" I asked, genuinely curious. Michael sighed, running a hand through his hair in that gesture so reminiscent of his father. "Honestly, because it was easier. Lisa gets so intense when her plans are challenged, and I've always been conflict-averse. Like Dad used to say, I'd rather swim around a rock than move it." I smiled at the memory. Samuel had indeed often teased our son about his tendency to find the path of least resistance. "But that's not fair to you," Michael continued. "You've always been so accommodating, so willing to adjust your plans for us, that I think both Lisa and I came to expect it, maybe even take advantage of it without realizing." "I allowed it," I said simply. "By never setting clear boundaries, I tacitly gave permission for others to make decisions that affected me without my input." "That doesn't make it right," Michael insisted. "And I want you to know I'm working on it. On being more direct, on standing up when necessary, especially when it comes to respecting your space and autonomy." "I've noticed," I said, thinking of the several times during the week when Michael had gently but firmly redirected Lisa or the children when they overstepped. "I appreciate it." "Lisa's trying, too," he said, a note of pride in his voice. "This week was a wake-up call for her. She's not going to change overnight. She's still Lisa after all, but she's making an effort." "Yes, she is," I agreed. "And that means a lot." We fell silent again, watching a blue heron land gracefully at the lake's edge, its long legs wading carefully through the shallow water as it searched for breakfast. "Dad would have loved this place," Michael said softly. "The cottage, the lake, all of it." "He would have," I agreed, feeling the familiar ache of Samuel's absence softer now after 8 years, but never completely gone. "He would have been out in a boat at dawn fishing, probably building birdhouses for the yard, definitely constructing a better dock than this one." Michael laughed. "With unnecessary reinforcements and at least 3 coats of sealant." "Your father never met a building project he couldn't over-engineer," I said fondly. "He'd be proud of you, Mom," Michael said, his voice serious again. "For making this happen, for standing your ground when we all showed up, for finding your voice." "I think he would," I agreed. "He always said I was stronger than I gave myself credit for." The sun had risen fully now, burning away the morning mist and warming our faces. From the cottage, I could hear the sounds of the household waking, the patter of children's feet, the clatter of dishes, Lisa's voice calling the kids to help pack. "We should head in," I said reluctantly, not quite ready to leave this peaceful moment with my son. Before we do, Michael said, I wanted to ask you something. Lisa and I have been talking and we'd like to come back, properly this time with advance planning and just the four of us. Maybe for a long weekend at the end of summer. The simple fact that he was asking, rather than announcing, warmed my heart. I'd like that very much, I told him sincerely. And Mom, Michael added as we walked back toward the cottage, thank you for not giving up on us, even when we bulldozed our way in here, for finding a compromise that allowed everyone to save face but still protected your boundaries. I learned a lot watching you this week. Inside the cottage, breakfast was already underway. Lisa had made pancakes again this time, with blueberries the children had picked from a neighbor's bushes with permission. Noah and Emma were setting the table, arguing good-naturedly about who got the Mickey Mouse plate that had somehow emerged from one of my still partially unpacked boxes. "Good morning, Lake people," Martha's voice called from the open front door. She stood on the porch with a basket of fresh muffins, accompanied by Evelyn and Thomas. "We come bearing farewell breakfast reinforcements." The small cottage quickly filled with conversation and laughter as everyone pitched in to prepare the meal. I found myself at the counter making fresh fruit salad with Evelyn working beside me. "We're heading out this morning, too," she told me. "Back to Cleveland. But Thomas and I wanted to thank you again for your graciousness this week." "It turned out well in the end," I said honestly. Evelyn lowered her voice slightly. "And thank you for the lesson you taught Lisa. She's always been our bulldozer, brilliant and capable, but sometimes steamrolling right over other people's feelings in her determination to accomplish her goals. What happened this week was actually good for her." "She's made a real effort to adjust," I acknowledged. "She respects you," Evelyn said. "That became clear as the week progressed. You didn't cave to her pressure tactics, but you didn't reject her either. You found a middle path that allowed her to save face while still maintaining your boundaries. That's a skill Thomas and I never quite mastered with her." After breakfast, the inevitable chaos of departure took over. Bags were packed, toys were gathered from various corners of the cottage, last-minute snacks were prepared for the journey. Throughout it all, I observed the subtle but significant shifts in our family dynamic. Lisa consulted me about leaving some of their lake toys for next time rather than simply announcing it would happen. Michael made sure the pull-out couch was properly closed and the sleeping bags neatly rolled. The children thanked me specifically for hosting them, clearly coached but seemingly sincere. As they prepared to leave, I found myself experiencing a complex mix of emotions. Relief at the prospect of finally having my cottage to myself, but also a surprising twinge of sadness to see them go. The week had been challenging, but ultimately rewarding in ways I hadn't anticipated. Standing in the driveway, I hugged each of them goodbye. Noah and Emma clung tightly, extracting promises that they could return soon. Michael embraced me warmly, whispering another thank you in my ear. When it was Lisa's turn, there was a moment of awkwardness, our history of tension momentarily resurfacing. Then she stepped forward and hugged me somewhat stiffly, but genuinely. "Thank you, Maddie," she said formally, "for accommodating us despite the unusual circumstances. And for what it's worth, I am truly sorry for how this all started." "Water under the bridge," I assured her, "or over the lake, as it were." She smiled at that, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Next time I'll call weeks in advance, with a specific request, not an announcement." "I'd appreciate that," I said simply. As their car pulled away, Noah and Emma waving frantically from the back window, I felt a sense of closure and new beginning simultaneously. The first chapter of my cottage life had been nothing like I'd expected, but perhaps that was fitting. Life rarely follows our careful plans. Martha appeared beside me, watching the car disappear down the lane. "Well, you survived," she said dryly. "The invasion, the occupation, and now the liberation." I laughed at her military metaphors. "It wasn't quite that dramatic by the end." "No, it wasn't," she agreed more seriously. "It actually turned into something rather nice. Your family made quite a transformation this week." "We did," I acknowledged, "all of us in different ways." "So," Martha said, linking her arm through mine as we walked back toward the cottage. "What's the plan now that you finally have your sanctuary to yourself?" I looked at my cottage. My dream fulfilled my new beginning, and felt a surge of contentment. First, I'm going to finish unpacking properly. Then I think I'll plant that vegetable garden I've been planning, and maybe look into getting a small rowboat. Sounds perfect, Martha approved. And if you need help with any of it, that's what neighbors are for, not to take over, mind you, but to assist when asked. She winked, and I laughed again. I've learned a lot this week, I told her, about standing up for myself, about finding my voice, about setting boundaries without burning bridges. Important lessons at any age. Martha nodded. Took me until I was 60 to really get the hang of it myself. As we reached my porch, I turned to look out at the lake once more, sparkling in the morning sunlight. In the week since I had moved in, this place had already witnessed conflict and resolution, tension and harmony, invasion and community. You know, I said thoughtfully, when Samuel and I dreamed about this cottage, we imagined peaceful mornings on the dock, quiet evenings watching the sunset, gentle family gatherings spaced comfortably throughout the year. Instead, you got the family circus on day 2, Martha observed. Yes, I smiled, but